Okay, I want to finish up. We go on to Savo, but there are two more points in Parsha's Seitzei. Number one, yesterday we spoke about why only men could give a get, right? Mm-hmm. Now, take a look at Perek Chav Daled Pasuk Daled. This is pretty intriguing. It's on page 1058. So the Torah says, the guy gives her the get. And I'm reading it again from the beginning, very quickly. I'll read 4 psukim here. Ki yikach ish isha, 4 lines, 5 lines on the top. Ki yikach ish isha ba'ala, a man marries a woman and they live together. V'hayim lo simsa chen be'enav ki motza be'erva azdavar. She does not find favor in his eyes. V'kosav la sefer krisos, he gives her a document of severing. V'nosan biyodav v'shochem beis, he puts it in her hand and he sends her out. She's divorced. V'yotza mi beso, she leaves his house. V'holcha v'haisa li'ish acher, then she goes and marries a second man. Usneya ha'isha acheron, and then this guy hates her. Oh. It sounds like a real winner, this lady. V'kosav la sefer krisos, he writes her a get. V'nosan biyodav v'shochem mi beso, and then he sets her out. Or ki yamus ha'ish acheron, maybe the second guy died. Asher lekachal ha'isha. Maybe the second guy either divorces her or he died. Says the Torah, Pasuk Daled, Lo yuchal bala harishon asher shilcha loshul lakach lalios lo isha. This first husband cannot remarry her once she's married a second man. Whether she leaves the second man through death or divorce, the first husband cannot marry her. Acharei asher hu tamah, she was defiled. Ki to'eva hi lifnei Hashem, it's an abomination. Do not corrupt the land which Hashem has given you. Now, the plain description of the mitzvah is that if she marries one man and they get divorced, and she marries a second man and he either dies or gets divorced, and now she can theoretically marry a third man. She cannot marry the original husband again. Now, keep that in mind. On the other hand, if she left the first husband and then committed an act of immorality, she lived with another man out of wedlock. She's not a married woman because she's divorced. She lived with she was divorced from Reuven. She did an Aveira with Shimon. Then she is allowed to go back and marry Reuven. If she marries Shimon, she can't go back to Reuven. If she just commits an act of immorality with Shimon, she couldn't go back to Reuven. What rationale could there possibly be for that?
The contractual, which was already...
Which is worse, getting married a second time or committing an act of immorality?
An act of immorality.
And yet, if she commits an act of immorality, she could go back to the first husband. And if she gets a kosher halachic marriage, she can't. What sense does that make?
Because the Torah prevents a woman from having another husband.
Either way, she's lived with another man. One way it was justified, and one man was like, take a chumash over. We're on page 1058.
Because the Torah wouldn't justify something.
Neither is justified, so neither one should be okay. If she can't go back to him after she marries a second man, she certainly shouldn't be able to go back to him. Kal v'chomer, kol shekain, lo kol shekain. What's the rationale? It's a good question, isn't it? Yeah. So it makes a lot of sense. Why? What's the Torah concerned about? The Torah is concerned about legitimized immorality. In other words, most Jewish women, frum women, are not going to commit an act of immorality, just live with a guy out of wedlock. Right? That was almost unheard of. People don't do that. Right? Frum people don't do that. I'm not talking about the world at large. Frum people don't do that. But what happens is, you could be in a situation here of what we would call legitimized wife trading, wife swapping. Reuven's married to Leah and Shimon's married to Rachel. And one day they decide, let's try each other. So each one gives the other one their wife a get. And then they switch partners and get married properly. Then they switch back. Because you got another get. Then you try bringing Levi and Yehuda and their wives, and everybody could, what do you call it, mix and match. Immorality is not something we have to be concerned about. It's not going to happen. So if the woman got divorced from Reuven and she went and lived with Shimon in an immoral manner, so you could go back to Reuven. How often is that going to? It's not going to happen that often. It's just not going to happen. Women are going to run around. But that once it's legitimate, if you could do it in a legitimate way, that's a real concern. The Torah refers to that as an abomination. That was what we would call wife swapping. I don't know, you guys are a little bit young. The New York Yankees in the 70s, there were two players, Fritz Peterson and Mike Kikich. I don't know if you ever heard of them. Fritz Peterson and Mike Kikich were both married. And at a certain point, Fritz Peterson got interested in Mike Kikich's wife. And Mike Kikich was semi-interested in Fritz Peterson's wife. So they started driving home from the ball games with each other's wife. So eventually, what happened was they traded. They simply traded families. Fritz Peterson married Mrs. Kikich and adopted her kids, and Mike Kikich married Mrs. Peterson and adopted her. They were called, it was well known, they were the wife swappers, right? And the, Fritz Peterson and Mrs. Kikich stayed married for years. They made a very good marriage, right? Mike Kikich and Fritz Peterson's ex-wife, they got divorced. And it was tremendous criticism, tremendous tension and criticism. It was a big case in the United States, actual wife swapping. And that's what the Torah doesn't want. The Torah says we're not going to get involved in that sort of thing. Okay? That's why it's called abomination. So again, for a woman to commit adultery, immorality is not how often it's going to happen. That doesn't what he called it. In a Torah society, it's not going to happen. But if you hold all the questions for about a half hour, if you legitimize it, then you run the risk of going into legitimized wife swapping. Legitimized wife swapping that we're not going to have. Okay? Take a look now at, I want to do one more point here. Take a look at, and this is very, very, very strange, one of the stranger ideas in Torah, which we need to understand this well. Perek Chav Hei Pasuk Zayin, 25:7. And this is where it's on the bottom of page 1062. So it says, last line on page 1062. Ki yeshu achim yachdav, when two men are dwelling together, umeis echad mehem, two brothers, one of them dies, uben ein lo, he has no children, doesn't mean only a son, he has no children. Lo tia eshes habeis hachutza leish zar, his wife, his widow, may not marry somebody else. Shmuel, take a chumash, we're on page 1064. His wife may not marry somebody else. Yavama Yovo Aleha, the brother-in-law should marry her. Ulakachalo leisha v'yibma. He should marry her as a wife. This is what's called yibum. Yibum, there's a whole masechta in Shas called Yevamos, one of the hardest masechtas in Shas. And the mitzvah of yibum is when Reuven and Shimon, Reuven dies childless, it is a mitzvah for Shimon to then marry Reuven's widow, his former sister-in-law. That's only if they have no children. If they do have children, if there are any children, and he's severely prohibited from marrying her, and if he does marry her, then it becomes the subsequent children are mamzera. He's not allowed to marry her if she has children already. And if she has no children, it's very extreme over here. If she has children, it's absolutely usher to the highest extent, to the furthest extent. And if she doesn't have children, it's a mitzvah to marry her. Okay, so that's called the mitzvah of yibum. Then the Torah says, "V'haya ha'bechor." We're going to read a few psukim here. V'haya ha'bechor asher tele, the firstborn, which she gives birth. Yakum al shem ochiv hames. He shall take the place of the brother, the name of the brother who died. Now, this does not mean what it sounds like. The firstborn from the second union is not named after the deceased brother. It means that the second brother gets all the property of the first brother. V'lo yimachesh shmo meYisrael, and his name may not be or should not be erased. So he marries her, and they have a child, and there's an idea that his neshama comes back in this child, which we'll try to understand in a second. But what happens if he doesn't want to marry her? Ve'im lo yachbot zeish lekachas es yevimto, if he does not want to marry her, ve'olsa yevimto ashar, fourth line, Ella Zakanim, she goes to the elders, The Amra, she makes a declaration in Beis Din. She says, Me'ein Yavami lahakim lachiv shem b'Yisrael. My brother-in-law refuses to perpetuate his brother's name. Lo ava yabi, does not want to marry me. So what do? They call him up. They call the guy up. He says, I don't want to marry her. They speak to him to try to convince him. He says, no, I don't want to marry her. So what does she do? One of the most bizarre ceremonies in Torah. She approaches him. She removes his shoe from his foot. That does not mean she spits in his face. That means she spits in front of him. She announces this is what's done, so a person does not want to perpetuate his brother's memory. This is called khalitza. So we have a halacha. The halacha is she's not allowed to marry anyone else because she is bonded to the brother-in-law. You understand? She's bonded to him. When Reuven dies, she's automatically bonded to Shimon. She cannot marry anyone else until Shimon does one of two things. Either he himself marries her, which is called yibum, or they go through this khalitza ceremony with all the myriad halachas that surround it, how big the shoe has to be, all of that. She removes the shoe, and once that's done, she's released and she can marry somebody else, and he no longer is allowed to marry her. That is what the Torah says in a nutshell. Nowadays, we do not do yibum. The Gemara says yibum because it could easily be not with the proper intentions that he's marrying her. Therefore, khalitza is recommended. It's what's practiced even nowadays. There are cases nowadays where where there is khalitza. It happens. A man dies, they don't have children, and it doesn't matter what age. A man could be 70 and his wife is 70, and they never had children. And if he has a brother, they have to do the khalitza ceremony to release her. Right? And she may want to remarry, she may not. But he has to do the khalitza ceremony, number one. Number two, there have been cases, tragic cases, where a woman, she's married to a young man. A couple gets married, and let's say chas v'shalom, there's a car accident, the husband gets killed. They have no children, and the husband has a younger brother who's 4 years old. He's 23. He was died. He has a 4-year-old brother. She now has to wait 9 years until she could remarry somebody because he can't do chalitza until he's bar mitzvah. There have been cases like that, tragic cases where from families there can be big age gaps, between the oldest brother and the youngest brother, the next brother. A sister can't do it. They could have 10 children. I know a family had 10 children. They had a son, then 8 daughters, then 10 daughters, then the youngest son. Right, and the gap between the oldest brother and the youngest brother is something about 20 years. Right, so you have this in many families. You can have a gap of 15 years, 17 years, very easily. Women are giving birth up till age 45 easily. So you could have a gap. This woman may have given birth when she's 20, and then she may have given birth when she's still giving birth when she's 45. So you could have these huge age gaps. There have been cases where the wife, unfortunately, has to wait a tremendous amount of time until she could get the yibum or the khalitza. That's what the Torah says. That's a description of the mitzvah here. That's what yibum is. Nowadays it's not right. However, if a man would do yibum, it would be valid nowadays. It works. They'd be married. They're officially married. Right? If he would do yibum, they're officially married. But we don't do it nowadays. Nowadays, khalitza is done, and she is released to marry somebody else. This became an issue, by the way, when the Iron Curtain, where the couple is living in America and the husband dies, they have no children, and it can't be done with a shliach. It can't be done by proxy. The brother has to come, and he's behind the Iron Curtain. They couldn't get out of Russia. There were women who were stuck. They can't marry somebody else because the khalitza hasn't been done. So it's done in Beis Din. It's done in Beis Din. It's obviously not a happy ceremony because it means somebody died. So it's certainly not a happy ceremony. But this is what's called yibum and khalitza. Okay, what's happening here? What's really going on? Let's try to understand what's with the shoe and what's with the spitting. The whole thing doesn't make sense. She removes his shoe. What's going on here? So it's a very fascinating idea that the Malbim and others explain over here. The first thing is, the Ramban says that this concept of perpetuating the memory of the husband who died without children, this already existed before the Torah was given. Where's the first example we find of this? Anybody know? Where's the first example we find of this? Yehuda and Tamar. Yehuda had two sons, Er and Onan. Er was married to Tamar and he died. And they didn't have children. So Yehuda told his second son, Onan, to marry Tamar, the sister-in-law. Why? Why does he have to marry her? The Ramban says, because the ancients knew this secret. There's something going on here with the soul that they understood that the next brother should marry her. What they explain is like this. If it's not the brother, then Yehuda marries her. If they understood like this, when a man dies, every human being has, why do you find people who want to get married, have children? Children take up a lot of time. Children take up a lot of money. Children don't let you sleep at night. And when they're teenagers, they don't let you sleep at all. Right? So children. Why would you want to have children? Why do it? Why? Your life. Why is your life meaningless? Why is life meaningless? Some people say, I met a couple. I remember meeting a couple, not a Jewish couple. They weren't interested in having any children. They were interested in enjoying life and having children. There are plenty of people like that in the world. So it's your legacy. What that means is that a person by nature wants, call it continuity, call it immortality. A person wants to continue on. And a person naturally sees his continuity through his children. It's not even something we're conscious of. A person may not even have defined why he's alive. He doesn't have a purpose in life. He hasn't defined his own purpose in life. He only knows one thing. He wants a continuity. That's why you find people try to become famous, so history will remember them, right? Because they want this continuity. There's a tradition which the ancients knew, and that's what the Ramban says, that if a man dies childless, the only way he can have a continuity is if his brother and his widow produce a body together. And then his soul enters that body. And that gives him a certain continuity in this world. Isn't that interesting? If he has his own children, it's not necessary because he's got that continuity. But if he has no children, then the only way to provide for the continuity is that his brother marries his wife and they provide a body for him to get married. If it's a girl, I don't know what happens. But whatever it is, if they have a boy, then that is the soul enters that body and that's his continuity in the world. That's what the Malbim says. That's what the commentaries explain. Now, let me ask you a question. Now, think about this. Think about this very carefully. You have a neshama. We all have a neshama. Our neshama is pure and ruchni. It's spiritual, pure spirituality. The world is pure physicality, right? The neshama does not want to be in this world. That's why it says in Pirkei Avos, Al korchacha ata notzar, you are formed against your will, and you're born against your will. The neshama does not want to be in this world. The neshama takes one look at this world and sees there's a lot of traffic downtown. I don't want to be there, right? And I also have to do midterms. Forget about it, right? I'm not interested. Right? The neshama does not want to be here. Now, let me ask you a different question. You have a body, and your body walks around on the earth. What happens if you walk around in your bare feet? It hurts. So what do you do in order to take your delicate body? We have delicate bodies. Human beings are delicate. We're the weakest creature, by the way. Animals are tough. We're weak. We're weak. We're pampered. What do I do so that my soft, delicate body could move around on the harsh, coarse earth? I have a buffer in between, don't I? What's that buffer? I wear shoes. And not only that, we even talk about, I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. Ever hear that expression? Boy, I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. I got news for you. Not a whole lot of you are even in your own shoes. How much of you is in your shoes? A very small percentage of me is in my shoes. Right? I wouldn't want to be in his shoes because, number one, there just isn't room for both of us. That's for sure. But, hey, I'm not in my shoes. My shoes happen to be on the bottom of my foot. But your shoes serve as the buffer that allows your delicate, sweet, delicate feet to be on this harsh, coarse earth. Right? Right? The shoe is the buffer. The neshama, your neshama, is in this world. The world is so materialistic, it's too harsh for the neshama. What's the buffer that allows the neshama to exist in this world? Your body. Your body is what allows the neshama to be in this world. The neshama is here, the world is here, and it's a materialistic, physical world. And that middle stage, the middle ground between the neshama and the world is your body. How much of your neshama is in your body, gentlemen? You know, we're so superficial. We think, well, I have my little neshama, which is about 5 feet 8 inches tall, and you have your neshama, which is about 5 feet 7 inches tall, and yours is about 6 feet 1 inch tall. No, it's so superficial. The neshama goes all the way up to God's throne. There's a very small part of the neshama is in our body. You know what the proportion is? Guess what? Same proportion as our body and our shoe. The same way that most of your body's not in your shoe, most of your neshama is not in your body. I don't know that it's the exact proportion. But the same way that the vast majority of your body is not in your shoe, the vast majority, if it is, you're in trouble, right? Or it's a big shoe, right? But I'm sure they have these houses somewhere, designed somewhere, usually in Holland or something, you know, a house shoe, you know, one of these weird European type things, you know, they have a house that looks like a pumpkin or something, you know. We're not talking about that. A regular shoe, most of your body is not in your shoe. The same way, most of your neshama is not in your body. That means, what your shoe is to your physical body, your body is to your neshama. Symbolically, then, your body can be seen as what? As a shoe. Oh, now we start to understand. The brother ideally should marry this woman. Why? Because they will produce a body for the deceased brother's neshama. In other words, what we would call a shoe for the neshama. He refuses to do it, so what does she do? She removes the shoe from his foot, symbolically showing you don't want to provide a shoe for your body, so we remove the shoe from your foot. And she spits in front of him. Spitting in any society, spitting is considered somewhat insulting and degrading. And she spits in front of him, and that allows her to now go, that's the khalitza ceremony, and now she goes free. The symbolism, the connection is the parallel. What a shoe is to a body is to a neshama. You don't want to provide a neshama, you don't want to provide a shoe, so to speak, for your brother's neshama. We remove your shoe symbolically. It's an act of shame, you're being selfish. We remove your shoe, and now the woman is free to marry anybody she wants. There's actually a case. Did you ever hear of Rav Chaim Ozer Grzinski? Chaim Ozer Grzinski was the Gadol Hador. He was the leader of the generation after the Chafetz Chaim. He was the leader of European Jewry before the war. He died in 1940. Rav Chaim Ozer, he was the Rav of Vilna. So Rav Chaim Ozer Grzinski once had to go to, he had to leave Vilna for health purposes. He had to go to St. Petersburg. He had to go to some not St. Petersburg, he had to go to some, you know, in Europe they used to go to these, what they call the spa, a dasha, I forgot what the word was called. What's it called? Banyas is in Israel. That's you know, but that sort of thing. They used to go to these health spas, you know, in a way he wasn't well. And he had to go to this spa for Rosh Hashanah. And the doctor said he had to go, and he ended up there in Rosh Hashanah. He was not happy. He's in a small town on Rosh Hashanah, and he's not happy. He has to be away from his congregation in Vilna where he wanted to be, and he wasn't happy about this, and he's wondering, why is Hashem doing this to me? Right? And he's there where he is. So he goes into the shul, it's Rosh Hashanah, and he davens, and he's not happy. He has a small group of people instead of his congregation in Vilna, and there he is out in this village somewhere in the boondocks, and there's a man comes in, and he walks over to him, and he says to the man, Shalom Aleichem, what's your name? Man tells him his name. He says, what are you doing here? He says, well, I'm actually on my way to St. Petersburg. I'm just stopping here for Rosh Hashanah. The man says, my brother died, and he left a wife and 4 children. And, you know, I spoke to her. We figured the most efficient thing is if I marry her, we'll do yibum, and I'll marry her. That way I'll be able to raise the children. So he says to my friend, there's no yibum here. There's no yibum here. She has children. You're not allowed to marry her. It's a severely forbidden relationship. He goes, no. The Torah says yibum, you marry your brother's wife. Says, my friend, the Torah says that you marry her if there are no children. He says, listen, I don't know a whole lot. If the Rabbi of Vilna, Reb Chaim Ozer Grzinski, would tell me that I'm not allowed to marry her, then I won't marry her. But otherwise, I'm going. He goes, please allow me to introduce myself. I am Reb Chaim Ozer Grzinski of Vilna. And then Reb Chaim Ozer said afterwards, now I know why I ended up here on Rosh Hashanah. Ribbono Shel moved me over here so that I would be able to prevent the tragedy among the Jewish people. That shouldn't happen. And sometimes a person doesn't know exactly why were we put in a certain position at a certain time. And sometimes for one little thing, a person can be put somewhere, and that's what it is. So this is the mitzvah of yibum, and this is the mitzvah of khalitza that the Torah is talking about. Torah is talking about over here, the deep symbolism over here of providing some sort of continuity. That's the idea. That's what the Malbim says. Okay, let's go on. Yeah.
Is the first mitzvah of the Torah also pruravu?
The first mitzvah of the Torah is pruravu. Yes. The first mitzvah of the Torah is to be fruitful and multiply, and the reason the Torah says to be fruitful and multiply is because all research has indicated that without people, mitzvahs can't be done. Right? If there are no people, if you're not here, you can't do. Right? So first thing we need is people. Right? At a deeper level, the real idea behind it is that since no two people are alike, no two people are the same. You could even have a twin brother, an identical twin, and you're not the same because you have different life circumstances. The very fact that you were born first or second is already a different circumstance. Different people have different personalities, different temperaments, different life situations, different abilities, different capabilities. And therefore, any person who serves God, you are serving God in a unique way which no one else could possibly copy. And therefore, you are a walking Kiddush Hashem. You are sanctifying and elevating God's name through your service. And you're doing it through your service, and you're doing it through your service, and I'm doing it through mine. And no two people are exactly alike. Therefore, the first mitzvah of the Torah is prurvo, be fruitful and multiply. There are more people serving God in different varied ways. That glorifies God's name. That's the glorification. By the way, there was a guy walked into there's a Jew from Israel, a frum guy, and he walks into this, a frum guy has about, 12 kids, and he has to marry off his kids. So he knocks on the door of a donor in America, a rich man, and he says to this guy, I have 12 kids, I have to marry them off, can you help me out? So the guy says to him, listen, I don't think much of this. You brought them into the world. They're your responsibility. I don't think much of your lifestyle. I don't think much of, I'll give you $18, but I'm not. This doesn't move me very much. This frum Jew says to him, can I ask you a question? He says, sure. He says, what would your reaction be if you had you were offered a partnership with Warren Buffett? The guy says, Warren Buffett? So I would grab it. He says, why? He says, well, first of all, it provides all sorts of financial opportunities immediately. Number two, provides financial opportunities for the future. Number three, it's very prestigious. I would grab a partnership with Warren Buffett. So the Jew says to him, the Gemara says there are three partners in every child. There's the father, there's the mother, and there's Hashem. Ribbono Shel is the partner in every child. He says, the Ribbono Shel has been my partner 12 times. Don't you think that's a little more impressive than Warren Buffett? Now, I would love to tell you, the guy said, wow, and he wrote him out a check for $250,000. Yeah, I don't know how the story ends. The guy might have said, well, good shot, but get out. I don't know how the story, I see your hand, I see it. Hold. I don't know how the story ended. I don't know how the story ended, but at the end of the day, he's 100% right. That's prurvo. Prurvo means we have a responsibility to bring children into the world, and as many as HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to have. Right? Worried about finances and this, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care. That's the first mitzvah of the Torah. Here the Torah is telling you, this is not prurvo. This is specifically for the continuity. Now, if you look at when it says, Al Shem Achiv Ames, third line from the top, the word, they don't get the name. You don't name the child after the deceased brother. right? On page 1064. He's called Yakum al Shem Achiv Hames. But the word Shem, the letters Shin Mem, are the two middle letters of the word Neshama. Neshama. Nun, Shim, Mem, He. The two middle letters of Neshama are Shem. Now, at a certain level, what that means is your name, whatever your name is a description at some level of your Neshama. That means when parents name a Jewish child, we have a tradition, when parents name a child at the bris, there is some sort of Ruach HaKodesh they possess that they choose a certain name. Assuming it's a Jewish name. If they use some modern Israeli name like Nimrod or Tal or something like that, that's not Ruach HaKodesh. That's Ruach Shtus. That's foolishness. But if they name a Jewish name, there's a tradition that they don't even know why. They make a name like, well, we're going to call him Chaim because the grandfather's name was Chaim, and we'll call him Shlomo because the uncle's name was Shlomo. And then they name him, instead of Chaim Shlomo, they call him Shlomo Chaim because the uncle's got more money. Whatever the calculation is, there's said to be traditionally, I don't know, there's said to be a Ruach HaKodesh there. Look, I know cases. I know one case where the couple couldn't decide the name. They couldn't decide the name. So they were working. They were already at the bris, and the husband says to the wife, "So what should we name him?" So the wife says, "Call him Chaim." She says, "What?" He says, "Chaim, like the Chafetz Chaim." So the guy says, "Okay." And then here's the moral. His wife is waiting for the name. Also, he goes, Yisrael Meir. Because that was the Chafetz Chaim's name was Yisrael Meir, so he thought that she wanted Yisrael Meir. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And I heard my wife tell me one. I don't remember exactly. They decided, I think, on the name was supposed to be Dovid. They decided together they're going to pick the name Dovid. So the wife is sitting there by the mechitza, and they have the bris, and they do the bris milah, and then they name the baby. And then the guy gets there and he goes, V'yikarei Shmo Yisrael Dovid Clonimus. Then what do you go? And the wife says, Clonimus? What? Where did? And the husband comes back and says, "No, I just thought at the last second that it would go well together." Something like that. Yeah, I got news. Don't do it, boys. Don't do it. I had a guy here once at Ohr Somayach. So he called me up from America. They had their first kid. And he said to me that he and his wife are having a disagreement. I said, what's the problem? He says, well, he wants to name his son, I don't remember exactly, but something like he wanted to name his son Vayered Moshe Min Hahar. There's something like that. And his wife wasn't going for it. She said, "Could we just call him Moshe?" So he asked me what I thought. So I said to him, we don't give them a theme. We give them a name, We're not calling him a pasuk in the Torah. We don't do that. He had this. What do you call it? So there is this idea. There is this idea of Ruach Hakodesh. How much? I don't know. How much? What it is? I don't know exactly what. The bottom line is try to keep everybody happy. That's all. Yeah.
Well, for example, like in Ashkenazi tradition and in Sephardic tradition, there is a huge contrast.
Yeah.
Because like for example, I know 10 or 12 guys with exactly the same name from Sephardic families. They exactly the same name and exactly last name.
Well, the Sephardim name after living relatives.
Yes.
And the Ashkenazim don't. The Ashkenazim don't name after relatives. Number one. Number two, it's brought down in Sfarim, Kabbalistically, if there's any fighting over the name, the baby's life is in danger. You don't fight over a name. I've seen people, ridiculous fights, over a name. People think that if you name after the deceased person, it's a merit for the deceased person. Reb Chaim Kanievsky says it's not. He says it doesn't benefit the deceased person at all to have the child named given his name. If anything, Reb Chaim says it could be a benefit for the child if the deceased person was a tzaddik. But naming a child Shlomo after a grandfather who was named Shlomo doesn't help the grandfather. That doesn't help the grandfather. That's what Reb Chaim Kanievsky said. Yeah, go ahead, Avram.
I had a question, which was, would the son of a yibum marriage, would the halachic father be the
the second father is the halachic father.
Second father is the
Yeah,
father.
and he gets all the property of the first father. Whatever the property he has, it all goes to him. It all goes to him. He gets the he gets the wife, and he gets the money from the first. He inherits, as opposed to a situation where if a man dies, if he has no children, then his brothers all. Let's say he did khalitza, then all the brothers inherit. Let's say the deceased brother had $1 million, and he's got 5 brothers, and the oldest brother, instead of doing yibum, does khalitza. So then all the brothers, including him, divide up that $1 million. If he does yibum, he gets all the property, which is one of the motivations to do the yibum. The motivation to the yibum is that you get everything that goes with it. So that's it's a strange concept to us, but it's a mitzvah in the Torah when it was applicable because people had proper intentions. The Gemara says once people stop having proper intention, potentially will have the wrong intentions. He's marrying her because she's beautiful or because of the money or whatever it is. Then the Torah says, then the halach is you do khalitza. Okay. Now, if you take a look at the bottom of page 1064, 4 lines from the bottom. 6 lines from the bottom. Lo yeh lecha bekischa, you should not have in your possession, literally in your pocket, Evan va'oven gedola uketana. You know what? Let's skip this because we haven't done anything on Savo. I want to start Savo at least a little bit. We got to do something on Savo because it's Wednesday already. We're not going to have a shir, so maybe we'll come back to it. But let's do something just right at the beginning of Savo, just so we can go into Savo with having done something. And the Torah says like this, top of page 1068. V'haya Savo el aretz asher Hashem lokacha nosin l'cha nachala. V'yirishtavi yashavta, when you come to the land and you inherit it. V'lakachta me'reishis kol priya adama asher tavi me'artzucha asher Hashem lokacha nosin l'cha v'samta batena. You take the first fruits. V'alachta el hamakom asher yivcha Hashem lokacha l'shaket shval shab. So here you have the mitzvah of Bikkurim. You go down to your field, and when the fruits start sprouting, you wrap something around them in order to demonstrate they're the first fruits, and eventually you put them in a basket, you bring them to your shalayim, and you give them to the Kohen in your shalayim. That's called the mitzvah of Bikkurim, the first fruits. And the root of the word is what do you call it? The root of the word is Bechor. The first fruits, you bring them up to your shalayim. That's the mitzvah of Bikkurim. The Torah describes it over here. What is underlying the mitzvah of Bikkurim? What's going on with Bikkurim? You take the first fruits and your first figs and your grapes, whatever it is, and your produce, you bring it to your shalayim. So the basic idea here is, there are 2 basic ideas the commentaries mention. The first is, there's an idea of the first of anything being very beloved. The first time that a person goes out to the field, you've been working in your field, you can't wait for those fruits to go. So you have to wait 3 years, because the first 3 years they're orlo. You can't even have them the first 3 years. The 4th year, it's Beiser Shei, you have to redeem them, it's Neto Revoy. And then by the 5th year, you're allowed to start eating the produce. But you can't wait to get at that produce because you've been waiting a long time, you planted it, you worked it, you've been watering the field. Comes along the Torah says, you know what? Don't grab. You know what? We're going to break that natural human tendency to take and grab for yourself, just like we found by the mother bird. We're going to break that tendency. You know what you're going to do with these fruits? You're going to take these fruits and you're going to bring them to your shalayim. Now, there is a certain connection people have when it comes to agriculture. Have you ever had a relative who's either grown tomatoes or cucumbers in the garden? They are sometimes the most annoying people that you will run across because they constantly update you. They're constantly updating you on their cucumbers or their tomatoes. Like the guy, they're coming excited. They're out in the garden. You're watching the 4th quarter of a football game. They're coming in. By the way, the cukes broke through. I really don't care. I really don't care. And if they're what? And then finally the big day comes, and they bring in this cucumber, and you're sitting at the table and say, "You want some of my cucumber?" And they've got this decrepit-looking, filthy, crippled-looking cucumber that's as bitter as an unripe almond. And he's got, "You want some of my cucumber?" No, as a matter of fact, I'm going to eat the nice ones that are 3 for $1 in the supermarket because it tastes a whole lot better than that thing that you're holding in your hand. But he's in love. He's in love. I'm eating my cucumber, and then there's like a play-by-play announcer, And he cuts it up. I'm eating my cucumber now. Does anybody want? No, we really don't. You know, and, wow, this is really good. No, it isn't. No, it's the worst that they see. Why? It was a labor of love. It's a labor of love. You invested yourself into it. Because you invested yourself into it, you have a desire for it. It says the Torah, you got to break that passion. You got to break that passion, that characteristic of I want it and I want to grab it. Take it to your first one's take to your shalim. That's idea number one. Idea number two is what we call hakoras hatov. Hakoras hatov means literally recognizing the good, what we call in English gratitude. And one of the worst character traits for a person is to be an ingrate. To be an ingrate means you don't appreciate what somebody has done for you. One of the underlying themes of honoring parents is because we owe them a debt of gratitude. They brought us into the world, what they've done for us. So here, you're coming into the land of Israel, and when you come into the land of Israel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving you the land. Show gratitude to Rebbe Hashem. Bring these fruits up to your shalim, dedicate them to Hashem. How do you dedicate it to Hashem? You give it to Hashem's agent in this world, which is the Kohen. That's how you dedicate, that's how you show gratitude to Hashem. So the Gemara says, Bira de shasis minei, a water hole that you drank out of, don't throw a stone into it. You drank out of a water hole, don't throw a stone in the water hole. The obvious question is, water hole's an inanimate object. He doesn't know whether you threw a stone in it or not. What's the difference if you took a drink and threw a stone in the water hole? Why not? The answer is because it's not for the water hole. What about me? What's it going to do to my character trait? If I drink and I don't appreciate an inanimate object and I toss a stone in and treat it as if it hasn't done anything for me, what happens with a human being? Then you can just take human beings for granted as well. Somebody who does a favor for somebody else, Rav Shach Zatzal, who was the Gadol Hador, when Rav Shach, he was married to the niece of Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer. Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer was his main Rebbe, and he married his niece. When Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer was nifter, he was the Gadol Hador, one of the Gedolei Hador. When he was nifter, when he passed away, Rav Shach purchased the grave next to Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer's. He purchased it for himself, that after he passes away, he'll be buried there. At a certain point, there was a young Torah scholar living in Israel, and this young Torah scholar was nifter. And he expressed the wish to be buried next to Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer. This young Torah scholar, years earlier, when Rav Shach had originally come to Israel, this young Torah scholar had gone to the port. I don't know if it was Haifa, wherever the port was, where Rav Shach landed by boat, landed by ship. And he was one of the people who greeted Rav Shach at the port. So Rav Shach said, I owe him a debt of gratitude. He greeted me at the port. He wants the grave, I have to give up the grave to him. Rav Shach gave up his grave next to his Rebbe, his uncle by marriage. He gave up the grave that he had purchased for himself because he felt he's got a debt of hakoras hatov. So the Torah is emphasizing over here the concept that a person has to realize you always have, a person has a debt of hakoras. Somebody did you something. People tend to think, well, I paid him back already. You know, we don't know what the statute of limitations is on gratitude. I don't know how much I owe. What, I owe him for the rest of my life? Maybe. How do you know? How much you owe? What, one for one? How much? Guy did you a favor. How much you owe him? That's the theme of the Torah. Yes, Avram.
It reminds me of Kain and Havel, where Havel bought the best of his.
What's the question, Avram?
Is there any connection to that?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen.